Scarlett Blade. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Silent Night, Memoirs of a Royal Guard, Chapter 32. There was nothing. I took a deep breath and leapt through the door, ready to fight, but no attack came and I felt foolish. Foolish, but not foolish enough to lower my guard as I looked around. Rich purple carpet covered the stone and was still in relatively good shape. I had ran off into the various narrow halls and shot off to each side of the foyer. In front of me there were two curved staircases that led up to the balcony, and I chose that path first. Both staircases were in the shadow of the large balcony above. It jutted out over the foyer and was likely designed to allow a noble to address those below. It also resulted in the trip up being somewhat blind, and that raised my hackles again. When I reached the hallway point on the stairs, it suddenly dawned on me that there was a soft light emanating from above. It wasn't much, but it was light. Light, but no sound. I lowered my stance just slightly as I crept up until I reached the top. A couple meters in front of me was a big pillar that I couldn't see around. Light spilled out from the opposite side of it, as if it framed a window. The light illuminating two large marble thrones that overlooked the foyer below. They were far nicer than one of Princess Celestia's occupied in Canterlot. For the second time I felt a wave of fear. Why did this place have thrones? Did some pony rule from here? Was Princess Luna concerned that they were coming back? The mission felt suddenly more important and dangerous. I wanted to see what was on the other side of the pillar. I needed to. I gave the pillar a wide berth as I crept around it. More light poured out into the floor, and I hesitated putting a hoof into it. Keeping my head down, I carefully tested the light. It was neither warm nor dangerous. I stepped into it and looked up. Vaguely I heard the sword clatter onto the floor as my mouth opened wide and was no longer able to hold it. My legs weakened on instinct alone, and I protested myself as I looked onward at the brilliance of the pillar. This was, in fact, a window. A stained glass window, the likes of which I had never seen. It put all the windows in the palace to shame. By comparison, they were nothing more than colored glass, meaningless. And in the center of this wonder she stood proudly, a dark purple alicorn more imposing than Princess Celestia. Her mane and tail were painted with evening heavens in the same way Princess Luna's were, and on her flank was a perfect full moon surrounded by stars. Even though I knew it was just glass, it was as if it was her actual presence. Perfect deep blue eyes stared directly into my soul and seemed to be looking at me. The light, all of it, radiated from the alicorn, a self-illuminating window. She was awesome to behold, and not the awesome we throw around casually. Awesome in the way ponies of old used the word. She inspired in me an overwhelming feeling of reverence, admiration, and fear. Compared to her, I was nothing. Compared to her, we were all nothing. No pony could stand in her presence, except one. There was another pony in the stained glass. It took all my efforts, but I tore my eyes from the alicorn to look at the other pony, a foal, or filly. Tiny by comparison, she was a deep blue unicorn with a smattering of black on her flank, black that surrounded a crescent moon. "Luna!" I gasped. What had I seen? I fumbled on the floor for my sword and hurriedly sheathed it, backing away respectfully. I crawled down the stairs, only where once all traces of the light were gone, the grip of my soul released. I put a hoof on the wall to stabilize myself. My coat was covered in sweat, and my breathing had turned rugged. What sort of magic is this? I had seen all I needed to see, and I was out of the crypt. With little regard of being quiet, I galloped out of the keep and leapt into the air. Flying would be faster. I zipped down the main street and into the winding hallway that I knew would take me out. What was probably minutes felt like hours when I burst out into the moonlight. My landing outside the cavern was not graceful. I crashed onto the platform, sputtering and shivering. Rest wasn't on my mind, however. I took a second to find my helmet and get it on before I started pumping my wings. I had to get back to Princess Luna immediately. There wasn't any time to go through the gate. The princess had to be warned. I flew to the balcony of Princess Luna's chambers. The great glass doors were open, and I zipped through them, and the invisible spell that kept out intruders. Only the princess and her royal guards were keyed for it. I had too much momentum, and I tried to pull back as best I could. It wasn't enough, and I resulted in a rough, loud landing as I crashed onto the princess's sitting area. "Intruder!" Lavender called before bursting into the chamber and charging at me. Risky was hot on her heels. "Intruder? It was here already." I turned, ready to fight just as Lavender leapt at me. "What are you doing?" My instincts kicked in, and I ducked out of the way. I took her by the forehoof and used her momentum against her to topple her onto the ground. Risky took a wild swing at me, and I easily dodged. He got a 1-2 right to the helmet. "What are you doing?" I managed to get out before Lavender jumped onto my back. She had her hooves around my neck to subdue me, and that just wasn't on my mind. Tucking my head in close, I bucked several times and finally tossed her over me and back onto the ground. "Be still!" Everything stopped and the lights came on. Princess Luna was standing in the door of her bedroom. Lavender and Risky Spur stared at me in surprise. "Sergeant?" Lavender asked curiously. "Of course, can't you see?" I stopped. Of course she couldn't. I could see in the dark. She couldn't. "Oh, I'm sorry. You two did excellent on this little test. Please, take up position outside and, Risky, go see a medic. You're bleeding." The pair looked at me like I was crazy. Then they turned to look at Princess Luna. She nodded and they left. Once again, once they were gone, the adrenaline wore off and the shivers started once more, forcing me to kneel. "Silent Night, what is the matter? What did thou see?" Princess Luna asked as she hurried over to me and pulled my helmet off. She cupped my face in her hoof. Gone. They were all gone, nothing left but rotting empty houses, bathed in silence and gloom. My breathing became easier as the princess helped me. The fear was starting to subside. There was a keep, and inside I found a stained glass window. It was so lifelike I thought I was staring at real ponies. You were on it with a purple alicorn. Princess Luna froze and stared down at me. My words lingered in the air before she finally stroked my mane. "It scared thou?" "Terrified," I admitted. "Is she dangerous?" "No. I promise thee she isn't dangerous. What thou art feeling, it is a magic of sorts." She shook her head. "I can't explain it other than to say that it will pass. Thou art in no real danger, I swear. Relax and breathe." "Who is she? You were a unicorn?" The princess leaned down and kissed my forehead. "Some secrets are best left buried, Silent Night." She then fixed me with her eyes. "Thou art not to speak of this to any pony. Give me thy word." What was the princess trying to hide? Any pony meant every pony, including Princess Celestia? Princess Luna never lied to her sister that I knew of, but I had to trust her. I was her protector, and what did I know? "You have my word. I will not repeat." She nodded and helped me up. Then she fidgeted. With a sigh, she asked, Were there many bodies? Were they all well cared for?" I blinked in confusion. The haze of magic starting to wane. "Bodies? No, princess, I'm sorry. I didn't mean gone as in departed. I meant gone as in departed." The second time I had made a motion with my hooves that looked like leaving. In her eyes I saw a glimmer of hope, and her expression changed briefly to joy before evening out. "None? No bodies? No bones?" "No. Whoever lived there, they clearly moved away. They left nothing but what was too big to carry." Princess Luna brought a hoof to her mouth, a tear in her eye. "They left?" Her tone was joyous. "They left!" She repeated happily before hugging me. "Thank thou! I know that this was difficult, but thy action has brought me great joy. Go and rest, Silent Night. I give my word that by tomorrow thou will feel like normal. Of course, Princess. Will there be anything else? She shook her head. No. Get some rest. Yes, Princess, I said before I bowed and headed home. By the time I reached my room, I was feeling almost normal. Unfortunately, even as the effects of the magic were wearing off, the reality of what I had seen was starting to set in. The place had been some kind of pony village, probably Pegasi, and they had an alicorn that dwarfed the ones I knew. There were too many questions and zero answers. As quietly as I could, I shut the door and removed my armor. Winterspear barely moved in her bed. She was a sound sleeper. I went over to my bunk and turned the sheet back. Another shiver went down my spine and I couldn't get in. Princess Luna had been a unicorn, a regular pony just like Crystal Wish's Iridescence or Sunny Day. I turned and crawled into bed with Winterspear. That woke her up, and through the haze of half-sleep she asked, "What you doing?" "Bad dream." "Okay." She looped her hooves around me and nestled to my back. It took less than a minute for her to fall asleep again. Taking the sheet in my mouth, I pulled it up over our shoulder before I settled it in. The sun would be up pretty soon, and I had duty. I trusted in Princess Luna. I'd be fine in the morning, and I would never speak of what I had seen again. Morning came awfully quick, and I stretched out in Winterspear's bunk. She was still asleep against my back. How that pony slept as soundly as she does, I'll never know. My mind was clear, and true to Princess Luna's words, I felt like myself again. Yes, I had questions, but they were rational now. Slowly I rolled over and nuzzled my sister. "Hey, lazy, sun's up. Don't you have somewhere to be?" My reward was a hoof covering my face. "Shh. If you're really quiet, it will be like you're not here." "Okay, well, I'm getting up. If you get up too, we could have breakfast together, though I'll buy." "You don't pay at the mess hall, Silent Night." She pretended to be cross, but she was moving. "Actually, since we're both up early enough, I wanted to take you to a great place Crystal Wishes and Velvet Step showed me. The breakfast menu looked awfully tempting when we had lunch there." Winterspear got up and started to brush her coat in place. "What is the occasion?" My response was a shrug. "I don't need one for my own family, do I?" "I suppose not. Let's get going." Well then, I hope you guys have had a wunderbar day.